In the humid, neon-lit aisles of a 24-hour convenience store in Cebu, everyone just knew him as Manoy Danny. He was a man of few words and silver-flecked hair, usually found restocking the heavy crates of San Miguel or mopping the floors with a mechanical, tireless efficiency. He wore his oversized clerk vest like armor, always zipped to the chin, hiding the jagged scar that ran from his collarbone to his ribs. A souvenir from a dark jungle in Sulu that didn't exist on any official map. Danny didn't just work, he observed. He knew the rhythmic squeak of the front door meant the 3 a.m. shoplifter was back. He knew by the way the delivery driver held his back that the man had a slipped disc. One night, Gina, a young single mother working the graveyard shift at the register, was trembling. A group of rowdy men in expensive barongs had been loitering for an hour, throwing lewd comments and refusing to pay for their items. One of the men sneered at Danny, tossing a lit cigarette onto the freshly mopped floor. "Clean that up, and tell the girl to give us her number, or we'll wreck this place." Danny didn't look up from his mop. "The trash bin is 2 meters to your left, sir, and the lady is working. Please pay and leave." The leader, a politician's son used to getting his way, lunged forward to grab Danny's collar. In a heartbeat, the store clerk vanished. The air in the store seemed to turn cold. Danny didn't punch. He moved with the predatory grace of a scout ranger, the musang of the mountains. With a subtle flick of his wrist, he redirected the man's momentum. Before the others could blink, the leader was pinned against the refrigerated drinks. Danny's thumb pressed into a nerve cluster on his neck that made the man's entire arm go numb. "I have spent 20 years in the mud so people like you could sleep safely," Danny whispered, his voice like grinding stones. "Don't make me remember how to hunt." The men didn't see a clerk. They saw the ghost of a warrior. They scrambled out the door, leaving their pride and a crumpled 500 peso bill on the counter. Danny went back to his mop. He didn't report it. He didn't brag. An hour later, he handed Gina a hot cup of instant coffee. He had quietly slipped an extra 2,000 pesos into her apron pocket earlier that night. Money he found from his meager bonus, because he knew her daughter's tuition was due. "Don't worry, Gina," he said, his eyes softening just a fraction. "The jungle is loud, but it's the quiet ones you have to watch out for." The clock on the wall of the mini-mart ticked toward 3:14 a.m., the dead hour. Outside, the rain began to lash against the glass, masking the sound of a modified mufflers pulling up to the curb. Danny didn't need to see them to know. He felt the shift in the air pressure when the door opened. His musang, wildcat instinct, honed in the deep, silent jungles of Mindanao, screamed a warning before the first shout was even uttered. 4 men burst in, faces hidden by motorcycle helmets. One carried a jagged bolo, 2 had snub-nosed .38 revolvers, and the leader brandished a sawed-off shotgun. "Down!" the leader roared, leveling the barrel at Gina behind the counter. "Get the money out!" Gina froze, her hands hovering over the register, her breath hitching in a silent sob. To the robbers, Danny was just a lanky old man in a faded blue vest, currently kneeling by the bottom shelf of the biscuit aisle. But in Danilo's mind, the store transformed into a tactical grid. Target 1, shotgun, primary threat, distance, 5 meters. Target 2 and 3, revolvers, secondary, flanking positions. Environmental tool, a heavy metal restocking cart at his hip. He didn't stand up, he slid. As the man with the shotgun turned to bark an order at Danny, the clerk kicked the restocking cart with the precision of a mortar launch. The heavy steel frame slammed into the leader's shins. As the man buckled, Danilo was already a blur of motion. He didn't use a gun. He used a heavy-duty stapler he'd been using for invoices and a can of pressurized air. He popped the safety on the air canister, spraying a freezing blast directly into the visor of the first gunman. Using the harness limb destructions he'd mastered in the Rangers, he struck the second gunman's wrist with the stapler. The revolver clattered to the floor. Danny didn't stop. He transitioned into a low sweep, sending the man crashing into a display of canned sardines. The leader tried to level the shotgun again, but Danny was inside his guard. He grabbed the barrel, twisting it upward just as it discharged. The blast shredded the acoustic ceiling tiles, raining white dust like snow. "You chose the wrong store," Danny whispered, his voice devoid of anger, filled only with the cold, professional lethality of a man who had survived 100 ambushes. He drove a palm heel strike into the leader's chin, snapping his head back. The man went out before he hit the linoleum. The fourth man, the one with the bolo, looked at his three unconscious partners. He looked at the old man standing over them, silhouetted by the flickering neon light, looking less like a clerk and more like a vengeful spirit of the forest. The robber dropped his blade and bolted out into the rain, leaving his friends behind. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, Danilo was back behind the counter, helping a trembling Gina count the safe money. He had already straightened the sardine display. "He just tripped, sir," Danny told the responding officer, pointing at the leader with the bruised chin. "The floor was wet. I told them to be careful." The officer looked at the knots used to tie the robber's hands. Complex, military-grade paracord hitches made from the store's utility rope. He looked at Danny's calm, steady hands. He didn't ask any more questions. The video of the Cebu clerk didn't just go viral. It ignited a firestorm. By noon the next day, a blurry TikTok of Danny's Musang move had 3 million views. The comments weren't just about the robbery anymore. They were filled with veterans from across the Philippines, recognizing the lethal, economy of motion style that only comes from Camp Texan. The truth didn't just leak, it erupted. A retired colonel, seeing the video from his home in Bulacan, dropped his coffee. He recognized that specific low-profile sweep. He recognized the way Danilo checked his 6 even after the threat was neutralized. The rumors began to take shape. Danny wasn't just a retired soldier. He was Master Sergeant Danilo Bacal Steele Rivera, the lead scout of the legendary 7th Scout Ranger Company. The public learned why he had disappeared into the life of a humble clerk. 10 years ago, in the dense green hell of the Zamboanga siege, Danny's unit was tasked with a high-value extraction. They were cut off, surrounded by 80 insurgents, with no extraction in sight. Danny had ordered his men to retreat, while he stayed behind with nothing but a bolos and a malfunctioning radio to draw fire. He was declared KIA, killed in action, after the ridge he was defending was leveled by mortar fire. He hadn't died. He had crawled through the jungle for 3 weeks with a shrapnel-shattered leg, surviving on raw roots and rainwater. When he finally reached a friendly outpost, he found out his name had already been carved into a memorial wall. Instead of reclaiming his medals, Danny chose a different path. He was tired of the noise, the blood, and the hero label that felt like a lead weight. He wanted a life where the only thing he had to protect was a shelf of bread and a coworker's smile. By 5 p.m., the mini-mart was surrounded. Not by reporters, but by men in barongs and olive-drab jackets. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up, and out stepped a high-ranking general, the same man Danny had pulled out of a burning Humvee in 2012. The general walked into the store, past the shocked manager and a wide-eyed Gina. He stopped at aisle 4, where Danny was calmly tagging prices on bags of chips. "Mister," the general said, his voice thick with emotion. "The army thought you were a ghost. We've been looking for you for a decade." Danny didn't stand at attention. He didn't salute. He just smoothed his blue clerk vest. "I'm just a clerk now, sir. The Musang retired a long time ago." "The Musang never retires," the general replied, placing a weathered, mud-stained Scout Ranger beret, the one recovered from that ridge 10 years ago, on the counter. "The neighborhood knows it. The boys you took down last night know it. And your fellow Rangers, they never forgot." Gina, watching from the register, finally understood. She looked at the extra money Danilo had given her for her daughter's school. It wasn't just charity. It was a soldier's duty. But the peace was short-lived. A black van with tinted windows and no plates began circling the block. The politician's father, a man with deep ties to the city's underworld, wasn't happy that his son had been humiliated by a clerk. Danny saw the van in the reflection of the glass door. He sighed, reached under the counter, and tightened the laces of his boots. The general saw Danny's eyes shift to the reflection in the glass. He didn't need to look back to know the van was there. "We can take care of this, Danilo," the general said, his hand hovering over his sidearm. "One phone call, and that van, and everyone in it, disappears into a legal black hole." Danny finally looked up, a small, tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "With all due respect, sir, you're in a suit. You'll get blood on your barong. Besides..." Danny reached behind the counter and pulled out a heavy, yellow plastic sign that read, "Caution, wet floor." "I haven't finished my shift."
Danny walked out the front door just as the van screeched to a halt. Two men stepped out, tucking suppressed pistols into their waistbands, their faces set in the arrogant sneer of men who thought they were the apex predators of the city. They didn't see the general's security detail unfolding from the shadows of the parking lot like a closing trap. They only saw the clerk. "You touched the wrong kid, old man," the driver hissed, reaching for his piece. Danny didn't reach for a weapon. He simply placed the wet floor sign exactly 3 feet in front of him. "I warned your boss's son," Danny said, his voice dropping into that grinding stone register. "The jungle is loud, but you're making too much noise in my neighborhood." Before the gunman could draw, Danny's hand blurred. He didn't use a Scout Ranger strike this time. He used the environment. He grabbed the high-pressure water hose used for cleaning the storefront and kicked the valve. A concentrated jet of water slammed into the lead man's chest, throwing him off balance. As the man slipped on the soapy tile of the entryway, Danny closed the distance in 2 steps. It wasn't a fight. It was a decommissioning. Strike 1, a palm to the throat to kill the breath. Strike 2, a tactical sweep that used the man's own momentum to crack his ribs against the curb. Strike 3, a surgical pressure point behind the ear that turned the world black. The second man froze as he felt the cold, unmistakable barrel of a specialized service weapon press against the back of his skull. It wasn't Danny. It was the general's lead aide. "The master sergeant told you," the aide whispered. "The floor is wet. You should have listened." 10 minutes later, the van was being towed by an unmarked military truck. The gunmen were gone, not to a jail, but to a debriefing facility, where they would learn exactly whose shadow they had stepped into. The general stood on the sidewalk, holding the weathered olive-drab beret. "The offer stands, Bacall. Come back. We need instructors. We need the legend." Danny looked back through the glass. Gina was there, wiping down the counter, her hands no longer shaking. She looked at Danny, then at the beret, then back to the shelf of bread he had neatly organized. Danny took the beret from the general's hand. He didn't put it on. Instead, he walked back inside and placed it on the top shelf, right next to a small, lucky Maneki Neko cat statue. "I'm already on duty, sir," Danny said over his shoulder. "And the 3 a.m. shoplifter is 5 minutes late. I need to be here to make sure he pays for his milk this time." The general let out a short, barking laugh, saluted the back of the blue clerk vest, and signaled his men to move out. As the clock struck 4 a.m., the rain slowed to a drizzle. The dead hour was over. Gina walked over to Danny as he returned to his mop. She didn't ask about the general, the Bakal nickname, or the men who had just vanished from the curb. She simply reached into her pocket, took out the 2,000 pesos he had tucked there earlier, and tried to hand it back. "I can't take this, Kuya Danny," she whispered. "Not after everything." Danny didn't stop mopping. "That's not from a soldier, Gina. That's from a coworker who knows that tuition is more important than a beer fund. Put it away." He paused, looking out at the neon lights reflecting in the puddles outside. The city was waking up. The Musang was back in his lair. The most dangerous convenience store in Cebu, guarded by a man who had survived the green hell of Sulu just to find peace in the fluorescent glow of aisle 4. "And Gina." "Yes, Kuya." "Tell the manager we're out of San Miguel. It was a busy night,